The Third Testament, Section 7, Chapter 28 to 31. The Developmental Path to Perfection. Chapter 29, Purification and Ascension of Spirit Beings in the Hereafter. Pangs of Conscience, Remorse and Self-Accusations. 1. I do not want your spirit to be defiled, nor to die with regard to true life. That is why I haunt you with my righteousness when I meet you devoted to harmful pleasures and pleasures. Your spirit must come pure to my womb as it sprang from it. 2. All those who leave their body in the earth and detach themselves from this world in a state of distraction, when they see my presence, which is revealed in the light of eternity that enlightens the spirit, awaken from their deep sleep under bitter tears and in the despair of self-accusation. As long as the pain continues in the child to free itself from its sufferings, the father also suffers. 228, 7-8. 3. Pangs of conscience and torments resulting from the lack of knowledge, suffering because spiritualization is lacking to enjoy that life. This and more is contained in the atonement of the spiritual beings, who, defiled or without preparation, reach the thresholds of spiritual life. 4. Recognize that I cannot take sin, imperfections or depravity of men as an offense inflicted on the Father, since I know that men do evil to themselves. 36, 56. 5. How light-filled your life would be and how great and groundbreaking your science would be if you would love your neighbor and do the will of your Father, if you would sacrifice some of your freedom of will and work according to what your conscience commands you. Your science would then, in crossing the limits of the material, touch the supernatural, for, up to now, it has not even approached those limits. 6. What dismay the spirit of the scientist feels when he leaves this world and finally comes face to face with divine truth. There he lowers his face shamefacedly and asks for his pride to be forgiven. He believed he knew and could do everything, denying that anything existed that lay beyond his knowledge or understanding. But now that he is standing before the Book of Life, before the infinite work of the Creator, he must recognize his wretchedness and wrap himself in humility before Him who is absolute wisdom. 283, 48-49. 7. Do not fear that when you arrive in the spiritual world you must think of what you have sinned on earth. If you let yourselves be washed clean by pain and repentance bursts forth from your heart, if you struggle to make amends for your transgressions, you will enter my presence worthy and pure, and no one, not even your conscience, will dare to mention your past imperfections. 8. In the perfect home there is a place for every spirit which awaits the arrival of its owner in time or in eternity. On the stepladder of love, mercy, faith and merits you will enter my kingdom one by one. 81, 60-61. Poetic Justice. 9. Only a few disciples have I had in this world, and in still smaller numbers those who have been like an image of the Divine Master. In the spiritual valley, on the other hand, I have many disciples, for it is there that one makes most progress in grasping my teachings. There it is where my little children, those who hunger and thirst for love, receive from their Master what mankind denied them. There it is where through their virtue those shine who were ignored on earth because of their humility, and where those cry sadly and repentantly who shone in this world with false light. 10. In the hereafter it is where I receive you, as you did not hope for it on earth, when, in tears, but blessing me, you atoned for your guilt. It does not matter that you had a moment of fierce rebellion during your life's journey. I will consider that you had days of great pain and in them you showed submission and blessed my name. You too, within the limits of your smallness, have experienced some Golgotha, even if these were caused by your disobedience. 11. Behold, by a few moments of faithfulness and love to God you will obtain life and grace in the hereafter. Thus my eternal love returns the short-term love of man. 22,27, 29. 12. Every good deed finds its reward, which is not received on earth, but in the hereafter. But how many would like to enjoy of this bliss already here on earth, without knowing that he who does nothing for his spiritual life will be without merit when he enters the same, and his remorse will then be great. 1,21. 13. Whom it desires for honors and praises of the world, let him receive them here, but they will be of short duration, and will be of no use to him on the day of his entrance into the spiritual world. Whoever is after money may receive his reward here, for it was that for which he was striving. But when the hour has come in which he must leave everything here, to set himself up in the hereafter, he will not have the slightest right to claim any reward for his spirit, even if he thinks he has done much for the benefit of charity. 14. In contrast, he who has always rejected flattery and favors, who has loved his fellows with a pure heart and unselfishly, and has rejected every material reward, who has been busy sowing the seeds of good, and has taken pleasure in doing works of love, he will not think of rewards, for he will not live for his own satisfaction, but for that of his neighbor. How great will his peace and happiness be when he is then in the bosom of his Lord. 253, 14. 15. I bring you in this time a pure and perfect teaching, which is why I tell you that at the end of your day's work you will be given credit only for what you have done in life with true love, for this will prove that you knew the truth. 281, 17. 16. Think not, because you do good work, and do not know the value of it, that you shall never know the good that you have done. I tell you that none of your works will remain without reward. 17. When you are once in the spiritual realm, you will know how often a small work, apparently of little importance, was the beginning of a chain of good deeds, a chain which others made longer and longer, but which will forever give satisfaction to him who began it. 292, 23-24. 18. I inspire you to acquire merits, but you are not to be moved thereby by the selfish desire for your own salvation, but you are to do your works in the thought of your fellow men, in the thought of the coming generations, whose rejoicing will be very great when they find the way paved by the first. Then your happiness will be boundless, because the joy and peace of your brothers and sisters will also reach your spirit. 19. How different it is with those who seek only their own salvation and happiness, for when they reach the place which they have obtained through their works, they cannot have a moment's peace or joy when they look at those whom they have left behind and who bear the heavy burden of their sufferings. 20. Verily I say to you, the true disciples of this teaching will be righteous and pure in their works, as their spirit, which is my own light. 290,76, 77. 21. If you are humble, your spiritual riches will increase in the life that awaits you. then you will have the peace that gives you the most beautiful sensation of your existence. And in your spirit the longing to serve the Father will be born, being a faithful guardian of all that I have created and a comfort to the suffering and peace to the peaceless. 260, 29. The ascent of spirit beings into the kingdom of God. 22. This is the third time in which your spirit can begin already on earth to dream of very high levels of life and very great knowledge. For he who separates from this world and already takes with him in his spirit the knowledge of that which he will find, and the unfolding of his spiritual gifts, will cross many worlds without dwelling in them, until he reaches that on which he is entitled to dwell by virtue of his merits. 23. He will be fully aware of his spiritual condition, will know how to carry out his task wherever he is. He will understand the language of love, harmony and justice, and will be able to communicate with the clarity of the spiritual language which is the thought. There will be no cliffs, distraction or tears for him, and he will experience more and more the immeasurable joy of approaching the homes that belong to him, because they are his eternal inheritance. 294, 55. 24. On the divine celestial ladder there are an infinite number of beings whose spiritual perfection allows them to take different levels according to the degree of development they have attained. Your spirit has been created with suitable qualities to develop on this ladder of perfection and to reach the goals set forth in the high counsels of the Creator. 25. You do not know the destiny of those spirit beings, but I tell you that it is perfect as all things created by me. 26. Still you do not comprehend the gifts which the Father has given you. But do not worry, for later you will become aware of them and experience their full manifestation. 27. The infinite number of spirit beings who, like you, inhabit different levels of life are united among themselves by a higher power, which is that of love. They were created for struggle, for their higher development, not for stagnation. Those who have fulfilled my commandments became great in divine love. 28. But I remind you that even when your spirit has reached greatness, power and wisdom, it will not become omnipotent, since its qualities are not infinite as they are in God. Nevertheless, they will suffice to bring you to the summit of your perfection on the straight path that the love of your Creator has marked out for you from the first moment. 32, 34, 37. 29. 7 spiritual stages of development must be covered by your spirit to reach its perfection. Today, while you are still living on earth, you do not know what stage of the ladder of heaven you are on. 30. Although I know the answer to this question of your spirit, I am not allowed to tell you at this time. 133, 59-60. 31. Every rung, every step, every level of life offers the spirit a greater light and a more perfect bliss. But the highest peace, the perfect happiness of the spirit is beyond all temporary abodes. 32. How many times will you think you feel the perfect happiness in the bosom of God in advance, without realizing that that happiness is hardly a foretaste of the world to come, where you must go after this life? 296, 49-50. 33. How many dream of dying in the expectation that this moment will bring them to me, so that they will then worship me eternally in heaven, not knowing that the way is infinitely further than they believed. In order to climb even one step of the ladder of heaven, which will lead you to me, one must have lived human life in the right way. Ignorance is the reason why many misunderstand the meaning of my teachings. 1:6-4:30. 34. Through man the forces of destruction were unleashed. War has sown its seed in all hearts. How much pain has mankind experienced? How much abandonment, misery, orphanhood and grief it has left behind on its path. Do you think that the spirit beings of those who have fallen in battle have perished, or that that part of life, the eternity that dwells in man, no longer exists? 35. No, people, the spirit survives war and death. This part of my own spirit has risen from the fields of pain and, on my way, seeks a new horizon to continue to live, to unfold and to develop. 262, 26-27. 36. I have given you the earth that you may all possess it equally, that you may live in peace and use it as a temporary home, in which you may develop your abilities and prepare your spirit to ascend to his new home. 37. I have said unto you, there are many dwellings in the house of the Lord. You will know them in the measure in which you rise. Each of them will bring you closer to me in increasing degrees, and they will be reached by you according to your works, for everything is subject to a divine order and justice. 38. No one will be able to prevent your passage from one level of life to another, and at the end of each of them there will be rejoicing and festivity in your spirit and also in mine. 39. So I prepare you that you may know that the way you must go is long, and that you will not be satisfied with your first works, thinking that they will already open the door to those homes for you. 40. But I tell you also this, that it is beautiful and sufficient for a spirit to come to the end of a stage of development and to pause to look back on the way past with its great struggles, its days of bitterness and its hours of peace after having overcome the innumerable obstacles. 41. Finally, the triumph, the reward and the righteousness that shine around you, and the Spirit of your Father present, glorious, blessing the Son and resting him in his bosom until he is prepared for his next stage of life. Thus he goes from one to another until he finally reaches the highest fulfillment, to dwell with me forever. 315, 34-36. 42. The Spirit spark, which makes man similar to his Creator, will draw ever closer to the infinite flame from which it sprang, and that spark will be a luminous being, conscious, radiant with love, full of knowledge and power. That being enjoys the state of perfection in which there is not the slightest pain or need, in which perfect and true bliss reigns. 43. If this were not the goal of your spirit, verily, I tell you, I would not have made my teaching known to you through so many teachings, for then the law of the first times would have been sufficient for you to live in peace on earth. 44. But when you consider that I lived among men and promised them an infinitely better world beyond this life, and when you remember, moreover, that I promised to come back in another time to continue to speak to you and explain all that you had not understood, you will conclude that man's spiritual destiny is higher, much higher than anything you can expect, and that the promised bliss is infinitely greater than what you can suspect or imagine. 277,48-49